Can I beat Path of Exile with only 1 HP? Yeah, sure, don't see why not. Oh, I guess not. Oh well, we tried. Thanks for watching. Okay, fine, let's figure this out. So, everyone's favourite happy murder loot simulator on 1 HP. And when I say 1 HP, I mean it. There will be no energy shield and no ward here to protect me. And in case that wasn't enough, I've decided to ban a few extra things. Minions will not be allowed. It seems against the spirit of the challenge to put up a wall of meat and flip off the enemies while I hide behind it. Secondly, there will be no traps, mines, totems or brands. These are all classic choices for builds that generally don't care about defences, and we're here for the challenge. Lastly, there will be no skills, uniques or abilities that give me shields or temporary HP such as Steel Skin, Molten Shell or Frost Shield. Oh, and no playing Gladiator. That would just be too easy, right? So, settle in and enjoy the slow deterioration of my mental well-being. Now, there's actually only one way to lock ourselves to 1 HP, and that's by taking the Chaos Inoculation and Eldritch Battery Keystones. Together, these limit my HP to 1, while also making my energy shield protect my mana. This leaves us with one lonely hit point, but it's going to take some leveling to get to those nodes on the tree. Until level 12, the best that I can do is equip a Skin of the Lords with the Eldritch Battery roll. Sadly, these don't come with Chaos Inoculation rolls, so I'll be playing with this Skin of the Lords until I unlock 1 HP, and then I'll be redoing everything in the campaign from scratch. For now, we're going to be using Cobra Lash to level, since it's got nice damage, poisons, and naturally chains between enemies. 1 HP, 10 HP, 1000 HP, these things still terrify me. And there we have it. With Spec into Chaos Inoculation, and when comboed with Eldritch Battery, we officially have 1 HP. I've deleted everything that I've picked up, and will be deleting the Skin of the Lords in 2 more levels when I can reach Eldritch Battery on the tree. And like I mentioned, for fairness I'll be running everything I've already done again, with 1 HP. My early game plan is basically just brute force. As we get into the later sections of the campaign, we'll unlock some tricks to help us survive, but for now, all we can do is smash our heads into the enemy and hope that progress happens faster than a headache does. Oh my god, we're past the rollers and we haven't died. Should have kept my mouth shut really. I've reached my first Mirage, which is how I'm hoping to make some early money, and I've just found out that you respawn just outside of them rather than at the start of the zone. Thank god that it works this way. This is going to save me mountains of time running back after every death. And that's our first boss down with only 55 deaths. Oh boy. And that's our second boss down. Oh, mother of RNG. We actually got a last resort, which is perfect for Cobra Lash. I think we found a bug. If I kill these Hellion dogs and stand in the burning ground that they leave behind, my health goes down to like 0.7? I'm standing in burning ground, but I'm not dying. Has anyone ever actually played on 1 HP to discover this? And that's Act 1 finished. I've racked up more deaths in this one act than either of my other characters have gained in the whole league, but you know what? There's progress. This is also a good time to make one of the most important changes to the build. You may not like it, but this is the ideal MTX. This is what peak Exile performance looks like. We've come to a rough realization. If you fight one of the bandits and then die to them, when you make your way back to the bandit for another try, it will have reset, including going back to full HP. This is going to take a while. We've hit a roadblock, people. If there's any distance between me and Creighton, he flicker strikes me and instantly kills me. If I'm behind him, he runs away from me, triggering the flicker strike. If I try to keep stepping around him, his high attack speed just means that he eventually catches up and hits me. Well, after quite a few attempts, I think we're just going to come back to Creighton a bit later with some more damage. Or perhaps even just help him instead of killing him. I had planned to buy my weapon upgrades with gold, but since I've already got characters in Trade League, they cost the price that they would in endgame, so I can't afford anything. This is a huge setback. We'll just have to consider it as an extra bit of spice to the challenge, I guess.
GGG, please. I don't know how much more spice I'll be able to manage.
Ooh, a Gem Cutter's Prism. That's worth a couple of chaos. In Act 6, when we unlock the currency exchange, I'll be able to sell that off. So, how is it so far playing with 1 HP? Well, it's kinda 50-50. Sometimes you run through zones and barely get touched, but then you have zones like this with mobs that absolutely seek your demise. Here, there's a ton of skeleton mages spamming Spark, so my screen is full of blue balls of instant death zipping around the room unpredictably. It can take between 30 to 40 minutes just to get through a single area like this. These are the places that make this challenge out. We've unlocked the use of Herald skills. Now, Herald of Agony is perfect for us, since it provides chance to poison, more poison damage, and just generic buffs to help us out. But sadly it also spawns a minion, which I specifically banned, so we're unable to use it. Instead, we're going to use Herald of Ash, which grants me 15% of my physical damage as extra fire. Not quite as good, but since all my damage is physical, it does give me a small damage boost. We're also starting to get a bit of gear now. We're using a shield for its implicit 25% chance to block, as well as all the best evasion gear we can find for the chance to evade enemy attacks. Well, we got Oak down first try, and after a game of Ring Around the Rosie, we got Alira down too. Now it's time to return to... Okay, fuck this, new plan. Kill your miner! Crush his bones! With the bandit problem finally solved, I can make my way through the Vole Temple and finish Act 2. And since we've entered Act 3, we've unlocked access to the Lord's Labyrinth, allowing us to ascend and specialise our character. So, let's finally talk about the plan. Since we have no HP, we need to rely on methods of avoiding the hits themselves, and there are 4 primary methods I'll be utilising for this. First up is evasion. Evasion comes on all dexterity helmets, chests, gloves and boots, and gives us a chance to evade enemy attacks, but not spells. Second of all is spell dodge. With the Acrobatics Keystone passive, we can turn all of our chance to suppress spell damage into chance to dodge spell hits at 50% of the value. So instead of reducing spell damage, we completely avoid it. Third on the list is block. Block is a mechanic that has a chance to prevent any damage from an incoming hit. The cap for this is 75% for both attacks and spells. Some of you may have been wondering why I banned Gladiator at the start. Well, Gladiators get lucky block, meaning that your block chance rolls twice and picks the better option. Then you can get the Azadi Crest Shield, which makes this triple lucky. You can actually end up with over 98% chance to block any damage this way. So yeah, abusing that just doesn't seem like a fun way to complete this challenge. So, how are we going to make up for all that extra block that we could have, and maybe should have, had? Well, my dear viewer, that's where Method 4 comes in. Elusive. Elusive grants 15% chance to avoid all damage from attacks and spells, as well as 30% increased movement speed. But it has a duration, and these effects slowly reduce throughout that duration. As an assassin, I can get an extra 250% increased elusive effect, meaning that damage avoidance chance goes up to 52.5% at its peak. Also, I can still abuse block just a little bit with the help of Svarlin. Svarlin gives us the lucky blah. Wait. Nah, you're joking. Well folks, it would seem that I missed a little fact. Svarlin gives ward, and therefore it is banned from this challenge. I fully planned 3 entire builds for this challenge using that shield, without noticing the ward. I guess I'll just have to settle for 75% block chance on the build instead.
Idiot, why would you put so many restrictions?
Anyways, the Labyrinth. We won't be doing the lab for a while. It doesn't really seem worth it until we have all of our defenses up to make our runs as likely as possible to succeed. So, continuing with Act 3, we'll grab the Bong of RNG for its hidden 50% increase to quantity of items found. Then we'll immediately cease to exist because a barrel decided that it was our time. Fucking barrels! We progress through Act 3, pick up the Grace Aura for more evasion, find some shiny new boots, and move on to Act 4. We push through Act 4 and 5. It took around 4 hours, but it wasn't too painful. Are you forgetting about Calm's dream, Tanjar? Where you discover that you can in fact die to Burning Ground, where every enemy and their nan dropped it under your feet every time you had the audacity to exist within 50 meters of them. Like I said, without many issues. And we picked up a new claw as we progressed. Now that we're in Act 6, we have access to Faustus and the Currency Exchange, allowing us to trade all of our various currencies for Chaos Orbs, meaning I can finally buy some upgrades from players. So, I'll buy myself a decently rolled Widow Hail, as well as a quiver with a bunch of damage rolls. The Widow Hail will increase all of these damage rolls by 234%, giving us way more damage to clear the campaign with, and the option of using bow skills, which are far safer. We'll swap over to a Tornado Shot setup, aimed towards killing enemies from as far away as possible. We'll also get rid of our Herald of Ash, since we don't do too much physical damage now, and equip both the Clarity and Precision auras for some mana regen and accuracy. Then we'll equip a couple of Mana Forged Arrow setups. Mana Forged Arrow support essentially just fires out a supported arrow skill after I've spent a certain amount of mana on my Tornado Shot. Lastly, we've got 8 respec points, 3 regret orbs and 2,000 gold left to respec our passive tree a bit towards bows and freezing enemies. And for any of you out there who think buying leveling uniques shouldn't be allowed, I make the rules here. And I've found it in my heart to forgive myself. Plus, it's not suddenly about to get easier. See, in Acts 1 to 5 you don't lose any XP for dying, so we could just progress no matter what. But now, there's a 5% XP penalty for every death. Basically, gaining levels has suddenly become incredibly difficult. I think when I find an area with good mob types that don't randomly butcher me from off screen, I'm gonna have to just farm that for an hour or two for XP, and then continue progressing. Oh, okay. That actually doesn't really do much for us right now since we have no gold, but I can definitely put that to good use when we finish the campaign. We'll remember to go left when we enter the Quarry Fortress, and cross the bridge to kill the enemies for a one-time free tattoo. Hey, that one's worth 15 chaos. I'll take that gladly. Here's an example of how painful this 1 HP run is. This happens constantly. There are so many enemies that have aim hacks. The only way to dodge them is to do a frame-perfect dash as they do their ability. Sometimes there's entire zones full of trash enemies just like this. Those tend to be the zones that I mentioned earlier that can take 30 to 40 minutes to get through. We cleared Act 6 and we've decided to finally invest into a cast on death portal setup. This setup drops a portal whenever I die, meaning when I'm deep into an area, I can instead resurrect in town and take the portal back to where I was, rather than running. This is a huge time save for this challenge. And my poor little leggies were getting tired of running from the start of the zone every time. Act 7 also goes pretty smooth. I mean, every act takes hours to do, and we still run into zones full of mobs that have dreadful mechanics for this challenge. But now we have some evasion and block, we actually occasionally survive for a few seconds. In the early acts of the campaign, zones like this were like reaching a roadblock. The brakes would be slammed on everything and there'd be zero progress. But now, it's more like driving into 1,000 traffic cones. You'll take a bunch of damage, but you'll slowly keep moving forwards. Act 8 goes okay too, but we start encountering Corrupted Blood rares. Corrupted Blood is a mod that rare enemies can roll that inflicts a physical damage over time effect on you. The problem is, unlike most negative effects, the enemy doesn't have to hit you or even really do anything to acknowledge you. You gain stacks of this effect from damaging them. This meant that every time I encountered one of these mobs, the moment one of my arrows had the audacity to scratch them, I'd immediately cease to exist. To counter this problem, I picked up a jewel that had been corrupted. Now the corrupted blood cannot be inflicted on you implicit. This should make me suffer ever so slightly less. We move on to Act 9 and realise that the Boiling Lake has an extremely safe set of mobs, so we farm it for XP. Then we kill off the Depraved Trinity and move on to Act 10, where we once again kill off Avarius, resurrect Innocence, and with his and Sin's help, we finally, after 26 hours of playtime and countless deaths, take down Katartha and finish the first hurdle of this challenge, the campaign. So, we're past the first hurdle. Now, our objective is to farm up currency through maps to actually construct a build that might, maybe, potentially have a chance of succeeding here. But what kind of map strat do I have any chance in? Well, there's actually something that's perfect for us. And if you've seen my videos, you may already know about it. I'm talking about Blight. Blighted maps are essentially Path of Exile's answer to Bloom's tower defense, where we fight off waves of enemies traveling down lanes with the help of a variety of towers. If we use these towers just right, we can actually clear these maps without ever having to kill an enemy ourselves. All the reward with minimal danger. But we do still have to consider the danger. Unlike the campaign, I only have 6 lives for every map that I open now, and if I fail a map, that's money lost. So I'm gonna quickly make something a little bit weird. First, I'll swap my quiver to a rearguard. This quiver gives me a bunch of attack and spell block and, combined with my Widow Hail, fully caps out my block chance at 75%. Then, I'll buy a Hiri's Ire for the evasion, spell suppress and cold damage to attacks. Sadly, we're not a high enough level to use it yet. Nothing that some time in the boiling lake can't fix. The reason we wanted a bit of flat cold damage is so that we can help the towers in case of emergencies by freezing the enemies. So for that, we'll buy an amulet none of you have likely ever even looked at. Rash Kaldor's Patience. This amulet makes it so that I always freeze, shock and ignite if possible, at the cost of reducing the duration by 20%. The length of a freeze is based on the amount of cold damage a hit does. If you don't do enough damage for a freeze to be at least 0.3 seconds long, then the freeze is just ignored. I'm not going to have that kind of damage, so this is huge for me and should provide a ton of utility when clearing blighted maps. Next up, I'll buy a pair of high evasion boots of spell suppress and then stop there because I'm almost out of gold and I need some left over to buy the blighted maps. So, we need to buy T16 blighted maps with nice narrow map layouts. Layouts that will funnel all the enemies into the same area to maximise the chance that our towers will get them all. We've picked up a Belfry, Lair and Flooded Mine map. Then, we want to buy amber oils and anoint the blighted maps with 3 of these each. This will make the towers extremely cheap to create and spam, maximising our chance of success. Then we can make the maps rare with an Orb of Alchemy and check for the modifiers of monsters cannot be stunned and monsters' action speed cannot be modified below base value. Either of these will make our strategy impossible, so we want to reroll any maps with those. Lastly, we want to corrupt the maps. Corrupted blighted maps can drop tainted oils, which are by far the most valuable oils available. We just have to hope that we don't hit either of those mods that we mentioned a moment ago. Now we can run the map. We want to build a chilling tower, seismic tower, and an empowering tower all within range of each other, and next to a spot where a bunch of lanes converge. If we level up all of these towers twice, not 3 times, they will pretty much keep everything permanently trapped in place. Then we can just use whatever damaging tower the enemies aren't resistant to kill them all off. You can see what towers the enemies are resistant to on the bar towards the bottom of the screen, or by looking at the icons above the enemy portals. For a deeper explanation of this strategy, I've linked WHOOOOOLE's guide in the description. It's nicely explained, quick and to the point. So, the map's done, completely deathless, and actually we gained a bunch of XP doing it. Now we can open... Right... Now we can open up all of our loot boxes, and we're done. I'm gonna be doing this for a while, so I'll update you with any shinies at the end. Well, we've discovered one issue pretty early. Rash Kaldor's doesn't actually cause you to always freeze. What this line actually translates to is you have a 100% chance to freeze, shock and ignite, which doesn't actually mean always. Sadly, it means that we still need to do a minimum amount of cold damage to hit that 0.3 second mark. Maybe I'll be able to pull it off if I change some of my supports, but it's probably fine. We're having an easy time clearing these maps regardless. You know, after how insanely stressful the campaign was, it's nice to just sit back, AFK, eat some sweet chili Doritos and watch some YouTube videos while the money rolls in. We farmed blighted maps for so many hours and we got a lot of golden oils, 3 tainted oils, a couple of divines, and 2 of the blight specific helmets, both selling for 7 divines each. After selling all the loot, we should have plenty of money to get a build together that has a chance of surviving the rest of this challenge. So, what's the build we're actually gonna play here? Well, with all the restrictions, I had to think outside the box, and I decided on a deck stacking wild strike build. The deck stacking makes it extremely easy to get capped evasion. The build also easily fits blocking, and with some clever itemization, I can also get 150% spell suppression for the spell dodge cap. So let's go shopping! First of all, we'll buy a Foulborn Hand of Thought and Motion, and a Fractal Thoughts. The Hand of Thought and Motion will give me a ton of damage from all the decks, as will the Fractal Thoughts. And if I make sure my strength is higher than my int, the Fractal Thoughts will also give me another 15% increased dexterity for even more damage. Next up, we'll get a 2 Flask Mage Blood. A corrupted 2 Flask Mage Blood is only 5 divines at the moment, and we actually can't make use of more than 2 or 3 utility flasks anyway. Then we'll roll a Silver and Quartz Flask to have increased effect as well as reduced curse effect and move speed. If you're wondering why I'm rolling these instead of just buying them, then how have you not realised yet that clearly something in my brain enjoys this kind of suffering? We'll also need a shield with as much block chance, evasion and suppress as possible, so we'll grab this one for 5 divines. Then it's time to craft some footwear. We'll buy some Storm Rider boots and hit them with a Redeemer's Exalted Orb to give them the Redeemer influence. Then we'll harvest Reforge them with Purple Juice, since it's so cheap, until we get T1 Avoid Projectiles with no other Redeemer mods. Then we'll buy a pair of boots with Tailwind and no other hunter mods. Then use an Awakener orb on the Tailwind boots first, then on our Storm Rider boots to combine those mods. And we got some move speed too, amazing. We can craft evasion and the boots are done. Now for the bling. We'll buy a helical ring with fractured T1 dex. And we're out of gold. That sucks. Well, I'll farm blighted maps all night and I'll get back to you tomorrow. Okie dokie, problem solved. We found about 7 or 8 more hours of blighted maps and have got plenty of gold and plenty more divines to work with now. Did I just do the Path of Exile equivalent of mining some diamonds off camera? I don't know, back to the ring. We'll spam Deafening Essences of Scorn until we hit T1 attributes with an open prefix and an open suffix. Okay, we got attributes, but we have no use for the fire res. Can we hit the 1 in 3 chance to remove it? Yes, we can. We'll craft suffixes cannot be changed and harvest reforged speed, hoping for attack speed. Well, that's a shame, but it was worth a try. I don't think we have the money to try that again right now, so we'll craft minus mana cost of non-channeling skills, and then buy a Calandra's Touch that is an exact copy of that ring. And that's the ring's done. Only a few items left now. We'll buy this deck stacking amulet for 15 divines and then craft minus mana cost as the final prefix on it. Then I'll respec my tree and buy a Brutal Restraint of Asenath with the number 7009. Brutal Restraint adds dexterity to all the small passives in its area, and this specific number adds a few nice dexterity bonuses to the major passives that I'll be spec'd into later. But now we have a problem. This keystone passive is meant to be acrobatics, which we desperately need to unlock spell dodge. But now it's changed due to the Brutal Restraint. So how do we get around this? Well, luckily there's a body armor made for this build. The perfect form gives us the acrobatics keystone, while also providing us with an enormous 50% spell suppression, which translates to 25% spell dodge. And since this is a body armor that nobody uses, I can get one corrupted with +1 gems for basically nothing. Then I can use Tainted Currency to 6 socket and 6 link it, using the crafting bench to get it back to 4 sockets or 4 links whenever I get unlucky and it goes below either of those. Now before I run out of gold again, I'll buy a large cluster jewel with Martial Prowess, Prodigious Defense, and Strike Leader, as well as a good evasion glove base with fractured crit chance and early damage. I never considered that gold might be the issue in this run. Okay, well I guess I'll buy up some gems from Lilyroth and just farm some Boiled Lake. A week ago I was blowing up entire screens of how strong my character was. Now I'm farming Act 9 for gold. At least we've made enough to go back to blighted maps. I remember when I used to enjoy these. That was a few days ago now. Okay, please be enough gold. We're getting really close to the end of buying and crafting gear, I swear. Just stay focused a little bit longer. Look, jingly keys. We'll roll these gloves with Deafening Essences of Zeal until we get T2 dex and an open prefix. There it is. Then we can craft suffixes cannot be changed, and then harvest Reforged Lightning, hoping for high flat lightning to attacks. Well, that was about as bad as it could go. Luckily, if we use Eldritch Currency to give the Searing Exarch a higher tier modifier than the Eater of Worlds, we can remove a prefix guaranteed with the Eldritch Orb of Annulment, and then try again. Sure, why not? We'll craft Life before slamming, since it's the highest weighted mod that we don't want, and then we'll hope for some evasion. And then we'll craft melee damage and melee strike range. Now we just need to roll Eldritch Currency for non-vile strike skills hit an additional target, and damage per dex, and the gloves are done. Just a couple more items, almost there. We'll buy a large claw cluster jewel with 12 sockets and fractured 35% effect, and then I'll alt spam it to try and get a mix of high dex, attributes, attack speed, and damage. Any combo of these is good, as long as there's dex. But sadly, I can't affordably target any of these mods, so alt spamming seems to be the cheapest option. It's not the best, but it'll do. We're so close. We'll grab a Foulborn Blue Nightmare, slotting it here in our tree, and then using tattoos of the Valaco Storm Rider on the int nodes around it. This will convert 18% of my lightning damage to chaos, allowing me to use the new Unholy Trinity support, which gives me huge damage buffs as long as our biggest hits swap occasionally between either chaos, lightning, or fizz damage. And since lightning damage either hits incredibly low or incredibly high, and our claw is giving us mountains of lightning damage, this will work out great for us. We can then grab a Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh, that when both used grant us the Opportunistic Ascendancy. giving us a ton of extra damage against rares and uniques as long as there's only one nearby. It also gives reflect immunity. Then we'll get 2 max rolled reckless defense jewels, which will cap out our block. They come with a huge downside of making crits far more likely on us, but I don't think a crit is going to make much of a difference to our survival. And now the only thing we need is our gems, so we'll buy up our Wild Strike setup, as well as a level 4 Enlighten for our auras. And finally, we actually have a build. It's been a few days in real life of only farming blighted maps on a character that can't even fight back. So with that, it's time for something truly hellish. Something that I've been putting up for a very long time. The Lord's Labyrinth. Without our Assassin Ascendancy, we don't really have any crit chance, so our damage is in the bin. And so we need to finally ascend to make this build function properly. The issue with Lab is that none of my defenses will prevent the damage from the spinning and buzzsaw traps, as well as the burning ground. If I touch any of those, I die. And I have to survive 9 floors of those traps, plus tons of enemies who only need a single lucky hit. And if anything does manage to touch me, I have to go right back to the beginning. Wait, what? Oh my god, no way. Can I even die to this? Okay, I can, but still. So apparently the spinny spiky traps and the buzzsaw traps also don't understand how to function if you only have 1 HP, similar to the Hellion's burning ground in Act 1. I kinda feel like that's cheating though. So if I get hit by a trap, then I'm just gonna commit stop breathe myself. It took maybe 2 or 3 attempts to get in the swing of things, but you know what? Normal Lab wasn't too bad at all. Maybe I've been worrying too much. Let's become an assassin, grab a knife in the back, and move on to Cruel Lab. Cruel Lab was slightly more hellish. Some of those trap layouts were awful. But it's done now, after around 11 attempts, and we can pick up Mistwalker so that we now get elusive every time we crit. I beg your fucking pardon. We can add that onto the list of stuff in this game we're discovering. I guess that's this run over. So we carried on with Merc Lab attempts, thinking that it would take all night, but somehow? Okay then, Merc Lab done on the 5th try. We won't need to spend the points here, since we want to spend them on a Bloodline Ascendancy. And that's Lab done. We're skipping Uber Lab since it's actually kinda pointless. There's not much we could pick up that actually does anything. The only option that actually has any use is Born in the Shadows from Saboteur, but blinding the Uber bosses isn't really going to help since pretty much everything they do is spell damage, which blind won't affect. So, we're going to head over to Ashabi and stop whatever the hell it is that she's doing to unlock her Bloodline Ascendancy. Okay, that's kinda what I was hoping for. Literal AFK slappy hands. We can then ascend into Ashabi's bloodline and pick up the Vivid Cat. This means that our elusive effect ends at 100% effectiveness rather than 0. Since we pretty much have permanent uptime of elusive, this means that we won't have to sit through that 100 to 0% period where it's at its weakest. It will just end early and we can refresh it back to its full 350% power. And with all my ascendancies done, the build is actually clearing maps. It does die completely randomly a lot, but it's actually capable of clearing T16 pack size breaches pretty well. We'll temporarily grab an Uriah Send Flask for the explosions, as well as a max rolled at Zeri's Promise for the extra damage. And now the build's running, we're going to speed through some maps hunting for Varashta to try and get her wish for golden volatiles so I can finally have some gold on this character. Ooh, we found one. Look at it. Look at all the pennies. It's beautiful. For the first time in this challenge, we actually don't have to worry about gold. So let's celebrate by buying a Thread of Hope with the massive roll. We can then slot it next to Supreme Ego. This allows me to pick up Sleight of Hand, Aspect of the Links, Weapon Artistry, Quickstep, and Finesse. And thanks to my Brutal Restraint, Quickstep and Weapon Artistry both come with some nice decks. Then, we'll buy a similar Fractured Cluster Jewel to earlier, and roll it in the exact same way, hoping for a repeated result. Holy! That's like a 100 Divine Cluster Jewel right there. And it's going to be wasted on this abomination of a character. That's going to replace the Cluster Jewel that I bought earlier with the 3 major passives. And so I think we're ready for some actual map strategies. I need a strat that's fairly quick to do, decent profit, and is low investment since I could very easily fail a map, and I don't want to lose hundreds of chaos that I invested into a map because I had some bad luck. So I've decided to do the budget boxes strat that Fubgun made a video on a couple of months ago. This strat basically relies on running Alk and Go haunted mansions with 3 ambush scarabs, 1 ambush scarab of hidden compartments, and 1 ambush scarab of potency. All we do is run to the Mirage, and because of the way the tile set works in Haunted Mansion, you'll have huge groups of strong boxes all together, and so the Mirage will often get a whole bunch of them all at once. I can just jump in the Mirage, open the operative strongboxes for some juicy scarabs, and leave to start the next map. If you want any more information on this strat, I recommend checking out Fubgun's video yourself, which I've linked in the description. This strat does, however, depend on Mirage, and so if you're watching this video after patch 3.28, then it might not be as effective anymore. This is the first moment so far where I've actually felt like I'm playing PoE somewhat normally. I'm doing a normal map strat, clearing through it fast. I do die very suddenly and kinda often, but the build has finally reached that point of power where it doesn't feel almost abusive to play, and the strat is feeling pretty decent. There's definitely more profitable strats, but for how low the investment is, it's quite nice. Luckily, I don't need to farm too much of this since I actually have the majority of the gear that I want. All I realistically want to buy now is an upgrade to a 3 flask Mage Blood and a new Hand of Thought on Motion that's been Volatile Varlord to have 1 to 15 lightning damage per 10 dexterity. So, after many scarab tinks, as well as quite a few valuable Mirage blueprint drops, we farmed up enough money to buy our last couple of upgrades. So, we'll spend 26 divines on the 3 flask Mage Blood and 25 divines on the 1 to 15 damage Hand of Thought on Motion. We can then buy a diamond flask with increased effect and T1 evasion that we can enkindling orb to give it 70% increased effect. And then finally, we'll buy a Vessel of Inkdar with the flat lightning damage roll. Normally, this is a pretty bad flask considering that it shocks you, but taking 50% increased damage really doesn't matter to us, so it's a nice bit of added single target. And with that, I think we're actually ready to fight the Ubers. Now this is going to be a seriously difficult challenge. Each Uber fight is difficult in its own right, but certain effects will be completely unforgiving to me. Ground effects and area effects such as Cirrus's Storms, Shaper Ball Pools, and any of the Uber Elders ground effects will all kill me instantly if I so much as lay a pinky toe on them. I can only assume that this is going to take many attempts for each boss. So, we'll start off with the easy ones. Uber Incarnation of Fear, Incarnation of Neglect, Eater of Worlds, and Searing Exarch. Each one of these fights could be summed up by me running in, holding down right click, and killing the boss before they even had a chance to respond. I mean, this was genuinely embarrassing for them. It truly does go to show how easy bossing can be when you have a lot of damage, and it helps you understand why most bossing builds just stack damage and don't put too much investment into their defenses. Also, at some point, I think I took my Frostblink gem out, so I had to handle the Uber meatballs on foot. All those hours playing Terraria Calamity really paid off here because I absolutely nailed it. I mean, look at me go. That's the kind of talent that you just can't teach. Uber Cirrus was the boss that I expected to be the hardest. In fact, I thought it would be near impossible. The storms around the arena, plus the storm that he casts in the center of the combat circle in Uber mode, plus the sheer amount of ground effects and mechanics that insta-kill this build with the slightest touch. In theory, it really did seem like it would be borderline unkillable. But no, it was actually extremely easy. I failed my first try because the storms were just screwing me over and locking me out of the arena, but on the second try, it went down without a fight, and I didn't die once. Uber Maven was a little bit more tricky. The nucleus fires out balls that chase you and explode, leaving permanent puddles on the ground. The slightest touch of one of these means immediate death. Normally, you stack all of these in the center, but I had to stack them all on the outside of the arena so that I could still hit the nucleus in the intermission phases. And they had to be in separate locations, since I couldn't place new puddles on top of old puddles without dying. I had to wait at the edge and dash at the last possible game tick so that all of the balls were perfectly stacked. I was already losing a ton of arena space to this mechanic, and I couldn't afford to give up any more space than absolutely necessary. Also, the random Atlas bosses that spawn during the intermission phases are just an RNG fest. Some Atlas bosses do nothing, others have abilities that are just guaranteed death. It took 7 attempts, but we got her down with some practice. Uber Shaper has similar issues to Uber Maven with the random Atlas bosses. Around 50% of the options for the bosses you fight before fighting the Shaper have mechanics that completely screw this build. And then there's the actual Shaper. He spawns 2 extra copies of himself, each firing out triple the normal number of projectiles and firing the beam. And, as you can imagine, touching that beam for even a millisecond means death. Also, that beam is not okay. The hitbox of it isn't even close to the visual. I'm just gonna borrow this example here from the Uber Elder fight. Then there's also the bullet hell. Normally you can hide behind a shield that Zana puts up for this. Not in the Uber fight though. Here, you just have to have some fancy footwork and dodge them all. And then there's the balls that leave permanent puddles. Just like the Maven, if I touch a puddle, my character takes a little lie down. And if all of that wasn't enough, there's the Shaper Slam, which in Uber mode cannot have its damage prevented in any way. It took a little while to clean up our execution of the fight, but after 9 attempts we killed the Shaper right in front of his daughter's eyes. Yikes. Uber Elder is very similar to Shaper, but honestly, quite a bit easier. The Elder himself doesn't really do many threatening mechanics, and handling 1 Shaper now rather than 3 is a lot more relaxing. Although there were occasional combos of abilities that were incredibly difficult to manage. But after only 3 attempts, the Elder died and the Shaper died with him. Again. Right in front of his daughter's eyes. Again. What the fuck? Last of all, and strangely the most difficult of the lot, there's the Uber Cortex. Who would have thought that this absolute joke of an Uber boss would end up being the hardest? Getting to the boss is already a challenge, since the pack size is so high in this area and all of the enemies fire such a ridiculous amount of projectiles. And then we get to the boss fight, which is actually extremely easy. The problem is those goddamn black puddles. These things are rarely an issue. I bet you forgot they even existed, but no, they spawn often and their favourite place to spawn is directly underneath you. And there isn't even much of a grace period for you to move out. If the game decides that it wants to spawn a puddle by my feet, then I'm going to be taking a little trip to my hideout. The ads in the intermission phase were also a bit of a problem, simply due to the amount of projectiles they fired and the fact that I couldn't kill them all as they spawned. Switching to Flicker Strike ended up being the fix for these guys, just so I could reach them faster and constantly be on the move. And after finally proving to me that he isn't just some joke, the Uber Cortex fell after 14 attempts. Which means we officially did it. We actually proved that yes, you can complete Path of Exile and kill all Uber bosses with just 1 HP. No energy shield, no ward, no minions, totems, traps, mines, brands, gladiator, anything that could be considered strong for this. And we did it with only 2,286 deaths. What the fuck are you guys laughing at? Well, I never said it was going to be easy, and I definitely didn't say it would be clean. Do you think Zizarin thinks about situations like this when he says,
"Try to die less than I do"?
So there you have it. Do I recommend trying out this challenge? If you're a regular functioning human who has any value for their time or sanity, then no. But if you're the type of person who likes to pay to have their testicles crushed by someone in a latex suit, then this is the closest experience the Path of Exile can offer you. And I haven't been into that kind of sick shit since last night. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I really hope you enjoyed. As stressful as it may have been, I know I certainly did. That being said, I'm going to head off and do some online shopping for a new desk, since mine's developed a collection of bite marks over the last week. So, I'll see you all in the next one.